Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dina, founder of Pain to Possibilities and the Change Pain Academy, and your host of the Willow Tree Chronic Pain and Trauma Summit. Today, I am excited to introduce you to our esteemed guest, Dr. Irene Cop. Dr. Irene Cop is the founder of the Stress to Success Shift Institute, who shows others how to bounce back from burnout and break through to the level of success, health, and happiness they deserve through her proprietary 5-step map to true success and freedom. Dr. Irene is a chiropractor and has extensive training in acupuncture, neuroplasticity, neurophysiology, and stress and resilience coaching. This is the reason why I'm so happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Irene.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure, Dina. Thank you so much for having me.
Today, we are going to be talking about a lot of different things, but I'm going to try to keep it to talk a little bit about, of course, chronic pain, but how you term Flameout Syndrome and the nuances to that and why it's important to understand it. So thank you again for being here. Before we get into it, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about how you got into your line of work and what you do?
I would be very happy to, Dina. So everyone has a story and a path, and mine is no different. And I started out as a doctor of chiropractic. Actually, before that, I was a neurophysiological meditation instructor and taught biofeedback. And then I wanted to further help people, so I became a doctor of chiropractic. And then I became an acupuncturist. And I thought I was on top of the world. As like practice was clicking. I had the best year of my practice financially, which meant, of course, I was helping more people. The thing is that I didn't know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And one sunny weekend, Mother's Day weekend, it'll be 20 years very shortly. I was driving north to visit a friend. I live in Canada, and we have something called the Canadian Shield. And for those of you who are familiar with it, it's very beautiful to drive through with winding roads and massive rock faces. On one of those winding roads, I lost consciousness due to a physical condition I didn't know I had.
Right.
And I lost consciousness. The road curved, and I drove straight into one of those massive 3-story rock faces. Oh. I came to, my knees were at my chin, not to get too graphic. There was a fire in the engine. My body was racked in pain. We had to be cut out by the jaws of life. I ended up breaking 10 bones. Wow. And having a head injury amongst others. But that wasn't the worst of it. My 2 young sons were in the car with me, 4 and 6 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. My 6-year-old developed PTSD like that because he witnessed a scene that had adults throwing up, mm-hmm. literally. And my 4-year-old son suffered a catastrophic brain injury. Oh. And he had to be flown to the nearest pediatric hospital, which happened to be Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So 3 hours south. And he underwent emergency life-saving surgery, like mm-hmm. on his brain. Mm-hmm. They didn't know if he was going to live for the first month or so. Oh. This was all during the first SARS. Oh. So the recent C-bug that's been running rampant is also a SARS. They just called it something different so it wouldn't get confused with the first one. They didn't want to scare people. Go figure. Yeah. That's why they actually chose a different name. Right. And so I was in hospital with 10 broken bones in isolation in one hospital. My son was in another hospital, and I couldn't see either of them. I couldn't have visitors. I was like literally going crazy with fear and worry. I was getting reports that my 6-year-old son was, threatening to hurt others, threatening to hurt himself, was being suspended from school. I was getting reports from the hospital for sick children, you know, first of all, saying once they decided that he was going to live, that he would never walk again, he would never talk again, he would never pass high school.
Oh my gosh.
This is the news I'm getting, and I can't see my sons in person. And as I said, I remember being all alone, lying flat in this hospital bed because of the 10 broken bones, including my neck, back, both sides of my pelvis, like, and so on. And I'm bawling my eyes out. Like, literally, it was the darkest moment of my life, because I will admit there was a dose of self-pity in there, you know, pain, whatever.
Understandably. Yes.
It was the fear of what was happening with my children. More than that, I was like spiraling down in guilt and shame and remorse. Like, look, what kind of doctor was I not to have known? What kind of mother was I to almost kill her young kids? My inner judge and jury, you know, convicted me of like that most heinous of crimes, that I was a monster, that I was this awful person. And, you know, really the question was, did I even deserve to live? And I literally wondered whether I deserved to live. I wasn't suicidal. There's a difference.
There is, yes.
Right. And at that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could either agree with my inner judge and jury and other people out in the world who were already judging me, or I could give myself the grace to understand that I was no different than hundreds of millions of other people in the world. And we could say now billions.
Yes.
People in the world who had shouldered the burden of chronic stress for so long that I had hit the wall.
Right.
Literally. I crashed and burned. It was beyond burnout.
Right.
Which is one reason why, when you said in the intro that I've coined a term called Flameout Syndrome, and it's literally that catastrophic version of burnout, because burnout is only supposed to be workplace related and only mentally and emotionally. Right. I felt great mentally and emotionally. It was the physical. Right. Right. And so there needs to be a definition that puts a name to that catastrophic level of beyond burnout. And I recognized as I was lying sobbing, and I'm a messy crier. I'm not like Demi Moore, like in Ghost with like the single tear. No, messy. And I was, that self-pity part was like, why me? Why did this happen to me? Like, after all, I did everything right.
Of course.
I was a meditation instructor. I was a doctor. So I ate right. I exercised. I did yoga. I got as much sleep as a mom with 2 young kids could.
Yeah.
But there was also that part of me that was going, why me?
Right.
Not just the self-pity, like, why did this happen? This isn't supposed to happen. I should have been fine. Why? And I had a lot of time to think in a hospital bed, because I don't watch TV. So I literally had hours and hours and hours with no visitors and nothing to do, lying flat on bed rest for over 6 weeks before I was even allowed in a wheelchair. And what the conclusion I came to is that there were hidden factors that set me up for failure, set me up to crash and burn. And it's those same hidden factors that cause hundreds of millions, and I'll say again, billions of people every year to crash and burn in their own way.
Right.
Because the crash and burn, the flame out, can happen in different ways. Mine happened for a way that was my weak link, if you want to call it, and other people happen in different ways,
Right.
and it, depending on what that weak link is, and if your listeners are wondering what that might be,
Right.
Flameout syndrome is really that constellation, and this is proven. We've known this for over 80 years, and conventional science and medicine has done nothing with it. Dr. Hans Selye, who is also Canadian, father of stress, over 80 years ago, did research and found this constellation of physical effects in the body due to chronic stress, leading to what's called adrenal exhaustion, where you've got nothing left. It's where your body has no more get up and go. It's got no more juice, right? It's completely depleted. And those constellation of physical effects are what lead to weight gain.
Right.
That lead to, from there, to diabetes and to Alzheimer's, which is now known as type 3 diabetes. It leads to autoimmune conditions. It leads to chronic complicated pain syndromes due to the inflammation that it causes, like fibromyalgia. So it's not all just in your head.
Exactly.
It leads to cardiovascular disease. It leads to increased viral infections. Can we think of one? It leads to cancer. Right. So basically, the top 10 killers throughout the world are directly caused by or aggravated by chronic stress. And I talk about flame out because we tend to think of like stress is like, it's got a stigma. Right. You know, like burnout, it's getting better because of, you know, that sea bug, but there's still shame and stigma around saying that I'm stressed, I'm burned out, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I can't go on, because our society wants us to give until we're bled dry.
We're very productive, aren't we? Productive society. Yeah. The expectation is high.
I call it the gauntlet mentality. If I did it, you can do it too. So if you're tired, if you're in pain, if you are feeling exhausted, well, then you must be weak. Right. You are a failure.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. It's so interesting you're saying this. I have personal experience with that too, just as a really quick interjection, because it's not often. The reason I do what I do is because I used to call myself the stress police, because my mom was in a very bad situation, and at work and also at home, and died at a very young age. And a lot of it was to do with stress. And I remember saying to the doctor, I know she was under a lot of stress. The poor woman said to me the night before she died, I can't do this anymore. Those were the words she spoke. She knew it was too much. And the doctor said, no, there's no way. And I said, that just ties in. And I think that's why our conversation is so important, to look beyond the biological, right? To really understand the context behind health, you know, the emotional side, the physical side, the biological side, the trauma. Trauma is leaves such an imprint, doesn't it, when it comes to, especially with your story, the worry that you felt for your kids, the stress that you were under, the self-judgment that you were, or self-criticism that you were going under. So I'm really thankful that you're bringing this attention to the world, because it is really, really important. So, you know, flip side of the coin, right? There is good stress. However, we have tipped the balance, haven't we, into this pure amount of stress that we experience as a society.
Absolutely. And well, Dina, you know that I'm a superhero, because when we first came on, my name that I had on there was Master Yoda. That's my coaching name. And number one, because having almost died, I believe that life isn't worthwhile if it's not fun. But here's the thing, I don't expect and wait for the universe to bring me fun. I create the fun. I create the lightheartedness, like calling myself Master Yoda and owning my superhero geekishness and other ways, right? In other words, so that the darkest topics I've worked with people who are dying, and we've been able to inject lightheartedness into it. And it takes the sting out of it, and it's actually good for you from an emotional and immune system standpoint.
Absolutely.
The thing about that, and the reason why I injected that, was because one of the things Hans Selye said, and I'll paraphrase, is that, to sound like Shakespeare, stress is neither good nor bad, except thinking makes it so.
Right.
Another way, for my superhero geeks, my Star Wars, it's like the Force. You can either use it and it can be your superpower,
right,
or you can allow it to use you,
right,
and it will use you up, like the dark side.
Right. Right.
Right. So stress gets a bad rap. In fact,
Yes.
actually, even though he coined the phrase, Dr. Hans Selye said that, afterwards he wished he hadn't called it stress. He says it's more like strain.
Right.
He was actually looking for a physics term to describe it. And so literally stress is just energy.
Right.
And you can either use it like your superpower, or it will use you up and be like your kryptonite.
Right.
And when it's that, and what tips that balance, as you said, tips the scales, is when there are hidden factors. And as I said, when I was lying flat on my bed and I realized that there were hidden factors that I hadn't even been aware of, that literally drained the energy. I think of them like energy vampires, like the Dementors,
right,
in Harry Potter, right? Where it's just like sucking the life, the joy right out of you, the energy right out of you.
Right.
To put it in more concrete terms, it's like we are these amazing high performance sports cars. Think like, what is the fastest car in the world? A Bugatti, or I think something's past it now. And you can put the best fuel in. You can maintain like the brakes and the engine and with the idea that it's going to go as fast and as far as it can and break all the world records. But if you have a leak in the fuel line, right, that fuel, the energy, isn't going to get to where it needs. And that's what I realized, is that, and that's one reason I chose Flameout Syndrome, because it applies to planes. And there's been, unfortunately, a number of instances in the media recently where planes have lost engine power. And it can be due to lack of fuel, which is one of them. And it can also be from the engine being doused, overwhelm.
Right.
Like, so I could geek out and talk about all the ways that flame out in a plane can apply to we humans. And really it's saying that it's not just chronic stress, it could be sudden overwhelming.
Right.
Stress, which is the trauma.
Right.
In fact, from here on forward, I would like to talk about trauma instead of stress, because, as I said, stress gets a bad rap. So it's, and people don't want to talk about that unless it's like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so stressed. But burnout isn't a badge of honor. Stress isn't a badge of honor. Flameout syndrome is not a badge of honor. When it is using you, when it has become your kryptonite, right, that you are weakened, that really is trauma. Right. Because trauma, in its simplest foundational form and meaning, is simply when the system is overwhelmed. Right. So emotionally, you might feel powerless. You might feel vulnerable, afraid, anxious, right? In other words, life is being done to you.
Right.
You are the victim of life. Mentally, it can show up as brain fog. It can show up as like poor memory. It can be like bone deep exhaustion where you're wired and tired. Right. It can show up as pain.
Right.
It can show up as physical trauma, and an injury like I had is physical trauma.
Yes.
Illness is a physical trauma that to your body. It's an insult to the body that needs to be overcome. Right. So there's different ways trauma can show up, and they are all valid, despite what our society would have us believe. Because one of my pet peeves is this idea that mental, emotional, and I'm going to add in there and be woo-woo and say spiritual, energetic trauma isn't valid. That's BS.
Yeah.
Because really, your brain, which is the seat of your mind, is the most powerful organ in your body. It's the most powerful organ really in the universe.
Yeah.
With its 100 billion brain cells or however many they estimate. And it's the only organ that has like that dual function, that physical and the mental, emotional.
Right.
And I'll add in there spiritual, energetic, that we don't understand necessarily yet. And because conventional methods can't show where your mind actually is, they want to assign it like it doesn't exist, kind of thing. So those are the different ways that trauma can show up for you. And it's really that negative stress that where like it's become your kryptonite. So talking about trauma in terms of that, and it could be the big T. Right? That sudden overwhelming where you hit the wall, or something catastrophic or life-changing has been done to you. Whether it's on a global scale like the sea bug, or whether it is on a personal level like you were mugged or abused or something along those lines. It can also be what people tend to talk about, the little t. Which is that as you said with your mother, right? It was those mini traumas
over time, exactly,
and over again, so that her system didn't have an opportunity to heal.
Right. And it's an important assertion to make, or that, because I think when people think about trauma, they're often thinking, oh no, I don't have trauma, because they're assuming the big T trauma, right? The big life events like a car accident or an abusive situation. It is so much more than that. Micro traumas are also termed as well. So you're right. Thank you for making that difference. So how do you see big T and little t trauma sort of on the biology of the body? How do you see that coming out in your clients, or what are you witnessing?
So going back to the way trauma can impact the body, it's when you are first in survival mode, which is really when you're feeling trauma, right? Your body is in survival mode. So within milliseconds, your body and brain shifts into your hardwired survival mode. At the brain level, the very first thing that happens is your prefrontal cortex, which I lovingly call your executive rock star team. It's that part of your brain that allows you to think logically, come up with creative solutions, make good decisions, actually initiate action and act on those decisions, and inhibit emotions that might get in the way of those actions. Right? That is the job of your executive rockstar team. Well, that gets totally wiped offline, because when you're in survival mode, in the olden days, it would be like if you were, stepped outside your cave and there was like a saber-toothed tiger staring you down. Right. That's not the time to stand there and go, well, let me think about this logically. Should I run
Yeah.
away from this tiger? Should I stand and fight? Should I fall down and faint and play dead and hope they don't notice me? Right? You're going to be the next meal.
Right.
Right. So that is why we are hardwired to, within milliseconds, that gets wiped offline. And then what's in charge is your subconscious mind, your primitive brain that runs the whole show. Primitive, I always think, is the worst word for it, because it just means that it's the part that we have in common with the rest of the animal kingdom. And so when that happens and your hardwired survival instincts kick in, and we're all different. Some of us are like gazelles, and we immediately want to run away. And in today's way of that may show up as, if you can't run away physically, you check out mentally and emotionally.
Or you avoid, or you, yes.
Exactly. In other words, you stick your head in the sand and go, la, 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 la,
la,
la, la.
Yes.
This ain't happening. Don't. You can go to fight. Which is actually the most common. And all we need to do is look around the world at the last couple of years and the increase in anger outbursts and road rage and riots and even on a global scale. We can see the evidence of that. People who are going into, again, my superhero geekdom coming out here, Hulk mode. You just immediately need to jump into action, and you got to do to make things right. And the thing is like you're running flat out like the Hulk and smashing everything in sight, trying to make things right. And yet you might get hurt. Loved ones might get hurt, like, because you're not thinking straight. You don't have the genius of Bruce Banner, like to rein you in at that moment. That is, I should start calling this Bruce Banner. Anyway, your prefrontal cortex. Or you might go into, as I said, freeze, or what's called faint, where you just like freezes, where like you're like, please don't notice me, please don't notice me. But it's also where you're like expending a lot of energy, because your brain's going a mile a minute, and how you're overwhelmed by fear of like, oh my goodness, look, what are all the ways this could go wrong for me? And I have to think this out. I have to come up with plan A, plan B, plan C, and just so how many of us are worry warts? That's actually the second most common. And then you could say that where you just check out and you're just down and out, you're done, that's where you freeze, you're just sitting on the couch binging Netflix or scrolling Instagram, So again, whenever you go into this mode, it's not your fault. You're not bad, stupid, or lazy.
Exactly.
It is your hardwired stress response. And all of these, if they go on too long, and let me say, in the body, we're all familiar, maybe not, with how that survival mode looks in the body, the blood rushes to your muscles, so that you can run or fight. Your pupils dilate so that you can see better, your digestive system shuts down, because that's not the time to be thinking about that. And interestingly, I know this is also about chronic pain, but so many of the world are overweight and obese now. Again, not your fault. Because when you are in survival mode, your body, your brain thinks that equates to starvation, and it needs to conserve energy, so that you can keep fighting and running. So it tanks your metabolism like that. And so those are like the first things that happen. So you're not eating, you can't sleep, because again, you could die if you sleep, So there's the insomnia, I got to stay awake, I got to stay alert, I got to stay vigilant. If, as in the animal kingdom, say, a gazelle hasn't been able to shake off the lion that's chasing them in a few minutes, it goes into what I call the marathon mode, That is where, because you've used up your store of adrenaline, which is your initial super energy,
Short term.
Right, to give you that burst of energy. And then you go into, as I said, the marathon mode. It's like, okay, you slow down, but I'm in this for the long haul. I'm going,
Yes.
I'm going, I'm going, I'm going. Lion's still behind me. I'm going,
right.
I'm going, I'm going.
Yeah.
And in our body, that's where our second stress chemical, our cortisol, our cortisol hormone ramps up. And that can take like hours to days for that to happen. And again, it's cortisol gets a bad rap because yes, it causes inflammation, but its sole job in the moment is to keep you alive.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? To keep you alive. And as a side effect of that, it also spikes your blood sugar, which if you're not being chased by a lion or a saber-toothed tiger, or not, most of us aren't, right? It means that all this blood, the sugar is glucose is running around your body. And even though it's fuel, it also causes a lot of damage. So your body wants to get it out of the blood system as soon as possible so it can't cause damage, and it sequesters it away in fat, right, to store. Right. So again, the cortisol causes you to pack on the pounds because most of us are not running away from lions or tigers or bears. Oh,
right.
No. Yeah. Right. So cortisol also, again, messes with your metabolism. It messes with your sleep patterns, and ramps up inflammation in your body. And this is how it can directly lead to Flameout Syndrome, which is where, as I said, it could be chronic severe pain, complicated pain syndromes. It could be autoimmune disorders. It could be diabetes, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancer, or it could be, as in my case, a hidden condition that caused me to lose consciousness while I was driving. As you know, and I literally crashed and burned. So that is how the trauma, whether it's a big trauma or little trauma, can directly lead to those conditions that not only burden our society and ourselves, right, at a substantially, but are also our greatest killers in the world. And how the little t, the micro traumas, as you called it, fits in with this is that in the animal kingdom, once, hopefully, that gazelle has shaken the lion, it automatically, like, it goes to the nearest watering hole, it kind of shakes it off, and within about 20 minutes, it's back to grazing and drinking water. Right. And it's done. It's done. It's finished. There is, like, that trauma is done. And you could say the shaking it off is literally like, and you will actually see them shake times, where it's literally finishing, like getting the stress chemicals out of the body. And once those are done, it goes back to resting and rejuvenating and eating and drinking. It doesn't look over its shoulder constantly and go, I don't know, is there another lion there?
Yeah. And that is the chronic pain story, isn't it? It's that sensitivity to everything, where everything amplifies pain. Not everything, but mostly everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we humans are the only ones that constantly relive the trauma. And amplify the trauma through, so we relive it, we dwell on the past and these horrible traumas that have happened to us, and we also future pace and worry about what happens if it happens again. There's the worrier. It's like, oh my goodness, like I need to be like, and I get it, I understand. It's like, and that's where the shock to the nervous system is, where you will literally in trauma, whether it's little t or big t, is where you are hyper vigilant, where you are, and that's at a neurological level.
Right.
It's not just I'm afraid to go out of my house.
Yeah.
That's a very valid part of it.
Yes.
It's also where your nervous system was overwhelmed and shocked.
Yeah.
So that you're literally like, many of our listeners can relate to this, where you can literally, it's like somebody startles you, something small startles you, and you jump out of your skin.
Yeah, exactly. That sensitivity. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And again, there's nothing wrong with that in terms of like, that's a normal, natural, let's call it natural part of the consequence of trauma. But again, we humans continuously aggravate it and relive it.
Yeah.
And so we keep the trauma close to us in so many ways. Yeah. And possibly even by calling it my trauma.
Right. Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Yeah, it's true.
I always say to my clients that words have power. And if you own something by saying my trauma, my pain, my exhaustion, right, you might think consciously that you want to get rid of it, that you want to heal from it. Your unconscious mind is going, but I can't let you do that because you just said it's part of you.
Yeah.
Right. My cancer, my heart disease, right. So words have power. If there's one thing I can leave your listeners with is please change your words and start talking about the pain.
Now, I apologize. I know at one point, and just in the interest of time, we were going to touch on a little bit about sort of the inflammation and fibromyalgia. Can you give our listeners a little bit of a summary about the connection?
Absolutely. So if so many of our listeners, I'm sure, have been told this at some point that, oh, it's all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you.
Oh, yes.
Get on with your life.
Yeah.
Just get up and work, distract yourself. It'll all be fine. Right. How many of our listeners have heard that? And it is all in your head. And it's because pain, whether it's fibromyalgia or other chronic pain syndromes, the first place pain is actually perceived is in your head. Right. And it's in a place called the limbic system, again, in that deepest part of the brain that we share. I'm going to quit calling it primitive because it's really not primitive. In the deepest part of the brain, your limbic system is the first place that pain is perceived. And how trauma, no matter what the cause of the trauma, can cause pain is because there is a part of in that area where you have what's called the amygdala, which is your emotion center, which is like your 5 alarm, like danger, 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 Will Robinson. In other words, there's a threat out there, there's a threat out there, there's a threat out there, right? The pain of any trauma you've experienced, the fear of any trauma you've experienced, the emotional pain, and what I'm talking about is rests in the amygdala. Right next to the amygdala is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is your memory center, right? So where the memories of the trauma or whatever traumas it might be are stored, right? And so when you have what causes the emotional, like the ongoing trauma is not necessarily the actual experience, the memory of the trauma. It's the emotions attached to the trauma. Right. that and how that impacted you. And wrapping around them is the limbic system.
Mm-hmm.
So the pain, right? So you have the emotional pain in the amygdala, and then you've got the limbic system that does many other things, but it's where you perceive pain.
Mm-hmm.
And a simple way of thinking of this, have you ever like sprained an ankle or maybe broken a leg or something, and you're healing and you can get through most of the day and you're able to manage, and then come nighttime when you have nothing to distract you and you are perhaps exhausted, or you get in a fight with your partner, or something else happens, and it's like all of a sudden the pain's through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is direct relation to the amygdala.
Mm-hmm.
And the emotional pain. And one of the things that even while I was still in physical practice, I came to the conclusion of, and I know, Dina, that I'm sure it's the same for you. I came to the conclusion that at least 95%, and that's conservative, I could say 99%, of any chronic condition, especially pain, is either directly caused by or greatly aggravated by psycho-emotional, energetic, spiritual pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to this conclusion and then started looking for answers. And again, 10 broken bones.
Yeah.
I understand pain in all its forms.
Yeah.
And I was also not only working with these clients that had severe complicated pain and cases, I was also working on healing my body, because I could have popped Percocet like candy,
right,
and not had a dent in the pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I realized, and so I went looking for answers and found other doctors and researchers who have corroborated what I said. Dr. John Sarno was a physiatrist out of somewhere on the East Coast, and he wrote a number of books called The Brain-Body Connection, or The Divided Mind, right? But really it was saying that your brain will do anything it can to protect you from that mental, emotional, energetic, spiritual pain, because it's actually far worse than physical pain. And it will distract you by causing physical pain somewhere in your body. Dr. Sarno called it tension myositis syndrome. And said he saw it in like carpal tunnel syndrome, or like basically fibromyalgia and other conditions. And when I realized that, and I started working with my clients and working through my own challenges, I realized that if I could clear the impact of the trauma on the system, then the physical pain would dissipate.
Right.
So that is the connection. The only reason it's in your brain is because that's where you perceive it. So if a doctor ever says to you again, yeah, it's all in your head, go, yeah, I know.
Right.
Now, how do you get rid of this?
That is for sure. And that is a tough, and I will acknowledge fully, that is a tough hurdle to come over top, because that is probably one of the main frustrations that the community feels, right? Is that they don't believe me. They're telling me it's all in my head, but they've not been told how pain and how trauma imprints on the brain, right, to create these sensations. And so it is not your fault. It is completely normal. We are a brain, we are biology, we are all of it put together, right? So once you understand it, it does help. But this is why we're talking about this. So Dr. Irene, do you have, before we go, any little hints that people can do at home, perhaps, to help them? Any words of encouragement or anything that you tell your clients that they can do right now or in the weeks ahead to help them with the Flameout Syndrome or just chronic pain and trauma in general?
I would love to. Number one, I want to emphasize words have power. And one of the first things I teach my clients is to, instead of experiencing the pain or whatever challenge inside of you, put it out, pretend there's, envision that there's a reality TV screen out to the side. Put it out there and start talking about the pain as if it's outside of you. That's why I said the pain, the trauma, the exhaustion, right? And because when you put it outside of you and observe it, and we're not even trying to get rid of it at this point.
Right.
It no longer controls you.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Because one of the things I'll say is that when I work with clients, because I talk about 360-degree success, which means what does a 10 out of 10 look like in your health and energy? Yes. Your relationships, your personal life, your career, your wealth, and guaranteed if it's impacting one area like your health, it's impacting other areas as well. So put it out there so that you can just go, oh, that's interesting. The pain just spiked. Wonder why that happened. Right? The pain just spiked, not my pain.
Yeah.
Right. So think of life as a reality TV screen.
Right.
And again, it takes the sting out of it.
Yes.
Pun intended. The
Beautiful.
sting. Bad joke. What can I say?
No, hey, we like jokes. No, that's amazing. I love the observatory approach, the curiosity approach. So fantastic. Dr. Irene, thank you so much for your time, for your input today. How can people get a hold of you when they would like to reach out?
I'm on all social, and our website is successshift.institute.com. Successshift.institute.com. Just make sure there's 3 S's in a row there. I know that's an easy way to spell it wrong. And DM me.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. So just DM me and reach out, and I would be happy to point you in the right direction.
Excellent. And Dr. Irene also will be giving a freebie. So you will find that on the playing page, or at least your summit page. So thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate our time together. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.